I am Dr. Hannah and welcome to my MDI series part 2. Again, MDI stands for multi-daily injection, aka treating type 1 diabetes with shots instead of an insulin pump. And I'm going through a series of tips that help me with my type 1 diabetes management on shots. Again, these are educational only, really not intended for you to start doing at home unless you talk to your doctor and feel like they're a good fit. We're really teaching here, not giving medical advice. So with that, we're going to talk about our second topic, which is pre-bolusing for meals. Now, this is an art, I think, as much as it is a science. And when we talk about meal bolusing, as you probably already know, we use short-acting insulin. There are many on the market. Humalog, Novolog, Fiasp are some of the most common that I see used. There are others as well. Difference between Fiasp and another Lumjev is that they kick in a little bit faster than the traditional Humalog and Novolog that have been around longer. The difference in that timing is going to be how you notice your graph change after you take them. And that will change your action step as far as when to eat, when to know if a correction is working, etc. But today what we're going to talk about is really pre-meal bolusing, because that's really an important part of getting your blood sugar in range most of the time, is getting your insulin to kick in a way where you're digesting, right? The idea is to match that on the graph. So what we would look at is really kind of if we have a graph here, and maybe I should learn how to do the text so that we can get actual graphs one day. But if we have a graph here, so this is kind of how much insulin is on board, this is time. What we would expect is you're going to take your insulin, you're going to have 15 to 30 minutes before it starts kind of kicking in, and then you're going to see that drop, right? And your blood sugar is going to start going down. If we didn't eat, it would keep going down and kind of go on. But the idea is that on that time graph, we want to digest our carbohydrates and the food that we're eating and convert it into glucose into our bloodstream at the same rate, which is the art. It's really hard to predict that, but it's possible if you're able to get that live feedback from your continuous glucose monitor. So what happens, we eat the meal, our insulin's kicking in, we eat the meal, and our blood sugar is going to go up. We're going to start digesting more and more of the carbohydrates in our meal. Maybe there's some protein and fat that slow down some of the carbohydrate digestion, or we have some conversion of protein into glucose, and then it'll come back down. And the idea is that the insulin matches that. And so what we're really looking for is to have not a grand blood sugar spike after a meal. 1, because it doesn't feel good. 2, because it can put some stress on your body. And 3, because it can kind of start us on this roller coaster that then means a correction, and then a low, and then a high, and more actions around diabetes. So when I think about managing my blood sugar, I think about it in 2 ways. I think my doctor growing up taught me to manage my blood sugar so I didn't get like complications when I was older, right? So I didn't get kidney disease, so I didn't lose a foot, so I didn't put stress on my body, increase my risk of cardiovascular disease. But what I learned over time is, yeah, that's super important to me. Also, how I feel today and my quality of life and living in the moment, important, is if my blood sugar is 350 at my best friend's birthday party, I'm not gonna feel as good or be as present if my blood sugar is 110, right? Like, I know that about myself from trial and error. Now, not everybody might feel that way, and that's okay, but that's what I've learned. And so really the pre-meal bolus, mastering that is a great skill. And that's true for insulin pump management as well. But on shots, I think it's something, really worth looking at. So we talked about our first tip, which was the long-acting insulin, getting the dose accurate, making sure we're taking it within the same hour every 24 hours. And then 2, that pre-meal bolus timing. So how do we do that? What does that look like? There's no right answer. It's going to change based on what's going on with you that day, what you're eating, what type of insulin you're on, so many variables, how much you slept the night before, how stressed you are, whether or not you're going to go on a walk after your meal. There are so many things that can change the way that our body responds to insulin and carbs. You probably already know that if you've been living with diabetes for more than like a week. Like it's pretty clear, you know, that you can do the same thing over and over and get different responses, I think, from the beginning. And so what I would say, and if you haven't noticed that, absolutely no shame. It is hard to catch trends in diabetes management unless you're really looking for them, or you know that they're there, and then you're saying, okay, let me keep an eye out and see if that's happening for me too. Because often we're not getting education about this. I know that this wasn't something I learned until much later after my diagnosis. So with that being said, the way that I try to match my insulin timing is looking at, okay, let's say I want to eat lunch, and lunch is coming up here in a few minutes. I'm going to put something together, and I will look at my graph and I will say, you know, where am I? So hypothetically, we'll kind of be in a range that is either high, considering, you know, where we are, what our personal thresholds are, high for us, in range for us, or low for us, right? So we'll kind of go through those strategies. And again, Dr. Stephen Ponder from Texas Lions Camp and his book, Sugar Surfing, he taught me this at the table in the cafeteria. He wrote it out on a piece of paper or napkin or something. And finally, you know, it clicked, and this wasn't that long ago. But if you think about, you know, if we're high, there's kind of three options here. You know, we could either be high and increasing, high and steady, or high and dropping, right? And then we're in range, and we can be in range and steady, in range and increasing, in range and dropping, and same for low. So that kind of creates 9 potential situations in which we would need to make a decision. And once you start thinking about it that way, you're like, okay, there's 9 different scenarios that I want to start understanding how they work in my body, or what to do that's different, you know, for each one. So we won't go through all of these, because I think that would be too much probably to remember and fully kind of break down, or maybe that would be something for another video where we're talking about insulin pump management and shots. But the intent is that we understand that when we are bolusing for a meal, if we are low, let's say I am 59, I am not going to take insulin and wait 15 minutes and then eat my meal. That doesn't make sense, obviously. So what will I do? And this one took me a long time to figure out the shots. Is I will treat my low, first of all, right? I'm 59. So I will take however many carbs it would take for me to get back up to the number that I choose to be at. So let's say I'm going for 90, I'm gonna have 8 to 10 grams of carbs. So I like apple juice. I keep it in my fridge because it's easy and quick. So I have 8 to 10 grams of carbs of apple juice, and then I know that my blood sugar is moving up. Now, if I wait till I'm, let's say, 90, and then I take my insulin and start eating my regular balanced meal with carbs and protein and fat, I will probably have a post-meal spike, because what will happen is my blood sugar will then be in range, and I will take my insulin at the same time as my carbohydrates. I'll start digesting the carbs from the meal faster than my insulin kicks in, and so I'll get that big blood sugar spike. Then my insulin will start kicking in, and it'll bring me, you know, back down. That doesn't feel as good, right? That's not the intent here. And so what works better, in my opinion, with the blood sugar piece for me is if I wait. So let's say I'm 59, take the 10 carbs of apple juice coming up. What I would do is I would wait until I'm at a safe number. For me, that's gonna be 80, 90. Then I'm gonna take my calculated meal bolus. I already treated with the carbohydrates. I'm gonna calculate my bolus regularly. I'm not gonna add or subtract any insulin from it. I will take unless I'm working out or I have some extenuating factor after my meal, but if I'm just gonna sit back down to work, I'm going to take my regular meal bolus, and I will watch my graph. So I'm 80, I'm coming up, let's say I hit 90, and maybe I'm flatline for a little bit, and then what will happen is eventually I will have a data point on my graph that will tip a little bit lower, right? You're gonna just start to see that going down. That's when I will start to eat my meal. Because what will happen is it means that I treated my low, I got to a safe range, I took my insulin, and then I started to see that the insulin was kicking in, and I knew, okay, the insulin's kicking in. If I eat and start digesting the carbs quickly, I will have insulin to cover those so I don't get this massive spike. Now, I'll probably still get a spike depending on what I'm eating. It may be, that's kind of normal to see a transition in blood sugar postprandial, whether or not postprandial meaning post-meal, whether or not you have diabetes. But the intent is that, you know, I don't get this big spike where I'm, you know, up into the 200s and not feeling as well. What I used to do is I would be 59, I would drink the juice, eat the food, wait till I'm 90, take the insulin. Or I would be 59, I would drink the juice, eat the food, and then like as soon as I would forget sometimes, honestly, and then I'd be, like 150, and then I'd take the insulin because I was scared and I didn't want to feel 59 again because that didn't feel great. But the timing is really important. Now, you have to understand the way your body responds to insulin to do this. You have to be kind of confident with insulin, because to have been low, come up, just be 80 or 90, take insulin and wait is kind of a bold move, right? If you get distracted or you take the wrong amount of insulin because you don't quite understand how your body's going to respond to insulin yet, or those carbs yet, you're creating a situation where you could go low again. I mean, that's the real deal. So you want to understand how insulin works for you, and once you're confident in those ratios and pieces, that's a cool tip, and that's a cool way to do it. So that is how I do a low, and that took me a long time to figure out. I used to just be high after lows often if I had a meal coming up, because I wouldn't get my bolus timing right, because I think about it differently because I was starting lower. If you are, let's say, within normal range, that range that you're going for, based on what you and your doctor decide, or you decide personally, is that you will see wherever you are, whether you're moving up or you're flatlined, once you take your insulin and you wait, you will see it start kicking in. And so it'll be like you'll have these dots in a row, whether they're going up or they're flatlined, where you'll see these kind of points, right? And then you'll see that first drop kind of moving down. It's just that first dot that's lower than the last one. That's usually when I think, okay, it's time for me to go ahead and eat. Now, I'm on FIASP. FIASP kicks in 15 minutes. So for me, not for everyone. And so I find that works pretty well. For some people, it's 10 minutes, and really it also depends what's going on, how quickly I see that change. But it doesn't really matter what type of your insulin you're in or how long you have to wait. The point is that you're just seeing that change on the graph. Now, it gets a little bit more tricky when you're in range and you're dropping, right? Because you want that insulin on board before you digest more carbs than would treat that drop. But you also don't want to take insulin, make that drop even faster, and then end up low. And I've definitely made that mistake before. So good way to think about this is to look at kind of the rate of the drop. So what I would typically do in this setting, let's say I'm 123, kind of diagonal down arrow, I would probably take my insulin and start eating. What I might do though, let's say I was eating like a meal with a couple different things. Let's say I have sweet potatoes and some fish and broccoli. I might start eating like one bite of sweet potato, so I've got a little carbs on board, so that I'm starting to digest carbs. I don't go too low. Then eat the fish and broccoli, then come back to the sweet potato and eat the rest. And that sounds like super complicated, but it's actually less hard than not feeling good after the meal. So with that, I try to strategize my digestion so that I'm not getting too low, and I would start eating sooner, right? Because it's going to be harder for you to know when that insulin's kicking in if you're already at this dropping position. So that one's a little bit more nuanced, and you could even kind of decide your food order or what type of food you want, based on that. And maybe if you're eating a lower carb lunch, that means like grabbing an apple to add to it. I don't know, whatever you like. And then when I'm high, or I'm in range and increasing, whether my blood sugar is in my high range and it's flatlined, it's increasing, it's decreasing, or I'm in that ideal kind of normal range, but I'm increasing, I take my insulin plus the correction that I would calculate to get to my goal blood sugar number, and I would wait for the dip. And often if I am running high, let's say like I'm 210 up arrow, and I take my correction and my meal bolus, I will have to kind of wait, for it to start kicking in, and then it's going to start dropping. I probably won't start eating just like right when I'm like 207 or whatever. It's, starting to come down. I'm probably going to wait till I'm under 150, because that's going to allow me to kind of get back to this nice range. And then if I have that kind of post-meal raise, I'm not running myself up into the 200s again. Now that, again, more nuanced, everybody's different, but what works about that is really having to watch your sensor if you're gonna do that. If I'm gonna have, and for me, everybody takes different amounts of insulin, based on their ratios. For me, let's say like a meal bolus, a pretty big meal bolus, if it's like dinner and I'm having a decent amount of carbs, might be 6 units. So if I'm going to do 6 units plus a correction at 210, that would be about 8 units. Now that's a lot of insulin, and if I let that 8 units go unattended, and I'm not paying attention and I get distracted doing something else, I absolutely will see double down arrow that I will not be able to catch until I'm lower. That's okay if it happens. You know, treat it with fast acting glucose. But the intent is, if you're going to do that, treatment where you wait longer than the initial change, right, in the graph that says your insulin is kicking in, you want to make sure you are attentive so that you can start eating at the right time. This is harder to do at like a dinner party where everybody's gonna sit down and start eating together. Might be easier to do if there's appetizers involved and everybody's eating, you know, around the kitchen counter or whatever it is. But really you wanna be at a place where you're attentive to it, because that's gonna make a difference, and it's very easy to get distracted and have that low blood sugar happen. That actually happened to me just the other day. We picked up a Chipotle bowl and went to the dog park with our pups, and we were going to let them run around a little bit and then come back and eat. And I bolused for the meal and gave my correction because I was running a little bit high before that. And I got distracted talking to a neighbor, and then realized on my phone I was getting an alarm. I was 70, like double down arrow, and I was like, I bolused for Chipotle. That's so many carbs. I have a lot of insulin on board. I wasn't paying attention, and next time if I'm going to make a bold move with insulin, I need to make sure I'm paying attention, whether that means turning my alerts differently or just cognitively thinking to, you know, open the app and take a look at what's going on more frequently so I can catch the timing right. So I was pretty low before my Chipotle and then had to figure that out, but you know, worked out in the end. That was just another learning curve. And I think those keep coming, you know, especially when you're transitioning from different types of insulin management techniques, or from pump to shots to pump, back and forth. You know, you just have to relearn those things. And so that was my reminder that I wanted to share with you. Thanks for listening. I know this video was a little longer than intended, but I wanted to get those points across because I feel like it's easier to pick up on the patterns that are happening with your actions and decisions if someone else has explained to you what could happen or how I've messed up or what works for me, and that way you can maybe visualize them or see them sooner in the chaos that comes, you know, with diabetes and lifestyle and variables. So stay tuned. I will have a couple other videos on this MDI series, and if you haven't already, it would mean a lot to me if you subscribed. It allows me to keep making free content for people with type 1 diabetes like you. So I appreciate you, and see you next time, hopefully.